Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Coder. In this episode, we are going to continue working on our Pong clone. Okay, we've got what are we doing today? Last time we created the HUD and all of the elements inside of the HUD. So this week, we are going to. What are we going to do? We are going to we're going to keep score. So that would require us to modify the two scoring elements at the HUD, and with that we might as well go ahead and add in the game over as well. So there are going to be 3 scripts total that we're going to be working with, and those are going to be the game script, the ball script, and the HUD script. Okay, so first things first, let's go ahead and get in the HUD script, and we're going to go ahead and create all of the properties of the HUD script and go ahead and assign all of the objects to all of the properties that we're going to assign to the HUD script, so that we're going to create in the HUD script. So let's go ahead and open that up. Alright, so we've got our HUD script opened, and all we really need in here is we don't need a start or update method because those are not needed for our HUD. All we need is properties in our HUD script. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a using statement up here because we have to import the Unity Engine UI. So we go to Unity Engine and add the UI namespace so that we can access those elements. And then we're going to just create a bunch of properties, and we're going to create them publicly so that we can access them in the inspector. And they're all going to be of type text, and we're going to make a player score, a computer score, one for win player, one for win computer, and then one for play again. Alright. So that's all we're going to do in our HUD script, and let's go ahead and go to Unity and click on our HUD canvas, and now we should see all of these properties that we can assign game objects to. Okay, so the ones we're going to assign, of course, are the player score and the computer score. Alright, so in our HUD canvas, if we expand that out, we've got our player score, so we just drag that in here. Got our computer score, and then we've got our win player and our win computer, and we've got play again. Okay, so that takes care of the HUD, and that takes care of the HUD script. We probably could have done this in the previous tutorial just to button things up nicely, but I forgot. So I'm sorry, but here we are with the HUD script and the HUD all finished. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is, with our ball script, what it does is it controls our ball, of course, and it's responsible for knowing whether or not the ball has passed the player paddle or the computer paddle. So we want, in our game, we want our ball to communicate with our game class to tell our game class whether to assign a computer point or a player point. So let's go ahead and open that up. And we're going to create 2 methods in here, okay, to start off with. And I don't like all this blank space here. Alright, so we're going to create a public method so that we can access it from other scripts. And we're going to make this void, and we're going to say computer point, that's what we're going to call it. And every time this method's called, we want to increment the computer score, which we don't have yet. We're going to actually create 2 integers, private ones. So private computer score and private player score. Okay. And what's going to happen is when this computer point method is called, we're going to increment our computer score. Computers. Oh, these are integers, by the way. forgot that. Alright, so then we're going to increment computer score by 1. We are going to call our HUD, which we don't have yet also. So we're going to create, we're going to create a private variable, and it's going to be of type HUD, and we're just going to call it HUD. And in the start method, right below start, we are going to, let's see, HUD. What am I doing here? We're going to create a game object also. So game object, and we're going to call this HUD canvas. Alright, so that's the HUD canvas. And then we're going to say HUD canvas equals game object dot find, and we called it HUD canvas. Okay, so that's now HUD canvas is now our game object that contains a reference to our HUD canvas, and all we have to do now is assign the HUD component, which is the class. So HUD canvas dot get component HUD. Okay. Now HUD is equal to the component HUD, which is the class. Alright, so now we can just reference that. So if we go back to our computer point method, we can just say HUD dot computer score. And what did I do here? Computer score dot text. So the text property equals computer score dot toString. Okay, and then what we're going to do is, let's stop with that, and we're going to create public void player point, and we're going to basically do the same thing here. So player score plus plus to increment the player score by 1. So then we're going to call the HUD again, and we're going to say player score, which is the property, and we're going to get the text property of that property, and we're going to say player score toString, because the text property requires a string. Right? So then we're incrementing our score, right? So either computer score or player score. So let's save that and then go to our ball script. Okay. And then in our, let's see, do we have a reference to the game class? We do not. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to create a private variable. It's going to be of type game, and we're going to call it game. Okay. And then in the start method, we are going to set game equal to game object dot find, and we're going to find game, and then we're going to do get component game. So we're assigning the game class, the component that's on the game object, to the game variable so that we can reference it. And then in the check collision method, right here, okay, so if it, here we're checking if the ball collided with the paddle, and if it did, then we're going to send it flying in the opposite direction. But if it didn't collide with the paddle, that means that it did not collide, which means it went off the screen either that way or that way. And since this, let's see here, collided with player equals true. So if it didn't collide with the player, then it just kept going, which means we have to assign a point to the computer. So we call game dot computer point, And then we do the same thing here, and we say else game.playerPoint. Okay, so we're calling those methods that we created in the game class. Alright, so when we call these methods, then our score should go up. So let's go into Unity and see what happens. Alright, so we're just going to let it go past. And our score actually went up to 6. And that's because it passed the player 6 times in the amount of frames that the ball passed. So we don't want that. What we do want is for that to only happen once. So we only want this to be called once. Alright? So we could do is very simply bool assigned point, and it's going to be false by default, and then we say if assigned point, and if it's false by default, then we set it to true, assigned point equals true. Okay, so let me think about this. We assign the point here. If we set it to true, then the next time around we're setting it to false again, so that's not going to really help us. So we need to, and we don't have to use assign point, we'll just put it up here, private. Okay. So yeah, we can do this because assign point, when the ball passes, we're going to kill the ball and then we're going to spawn a new ball, and assign point is false again. So we can use assign point for both player and computer because we only get to actually use it once, because it's not going to pass the computer paddle and the player paddle at the same time. So we say if assign point, then assign point equals true, game.playerPoint. Okay. Alright, so that should work. So let's go ahead and go back to Unity, press play. And press play. Let's move out of the way here. And we didn't get to assign a point at all. Oh, I did that backwards. If not assign point, okay, so we have to check if the point hasn't been assigned. That's right. Okay, so save that, go back to Unity, press play. And we got 1 point for the player. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to make it so that if there's a point assigned, okay, if there's a point assigned to either the computer or the player, we want to spawn another ball. Okay, we want to spawn a ball for the computer or for the player, either way, that that spawns when after we want to spawn another ball after either the computer or the player have scored. So we need to create another method, and we're going to call this one, we can make it private void, and let's call it next round. Okay. Okay, so in the next round, really all we have to do is let's reset the position. Let's reset the position of the computer paddle. Okay, so no. Paddle computer. Alright, so we'll have to make a variable. So let's go with private game object paddle computer. And we're going to reset the position of the computer paddle because we're at a new round. So paddle computer, way up here. Dot transform dot local position equals new vector 3 paddle computer dot transform dot local position dot x 0 on the y, and paddle computer dot transform dot local position dot z for the z axis, and then we're going to destroy the ball game object, and then we're going to call the spawn ball method, okay, which is going to just call this method here to spawn a new ball. And so that, now that we have our next round method, all we have to do is call it here. So we go next round and next round, and then that's one more thing. Paddle computer has to still be assigned. So let's go up here. Paddle computer equals game object dot find, and we called it computer underscore paddle. Okay. And that should be that. Oops, end quotes. There. Alright, let's go into Unity and have a look here. One score for the computer, another score for the computer, another score for the computer. Alright, let's see if we can challenge the computer a little bit. You're not gonna get it. Oh, here goes one for the player. Oh, crap. Okay. Ha ha ha. Come on, come get it. Got you, computer. What? Okay, so obviously, this could now go on forever. We could play, and the score would just keep going up. There would never be really a winner for this game. Oh. And obviously, if there could be, it almost seems like it would be the computer. Because I'm really sucking right now. Damn. So obviously, we are going to want a way to make a game over happen for this game. If someone gets to a predetermined score, say 10, but for the sake of keeping the video brief, we are going to make it so that whoever gets the 2 first wins. Because, as you can see, it's taking me like forever to even get to 10. And we can make this game a lot harder for the computer hit, because he does seem to get away with things very easily. Come on. Oh, we're getting so close. Anyways, so that's the scoring part. What we want is we want to be able to have a game over. So, where do I have that? Not in here. Check score. Alright, so we can just throw that into the game class. And we're going to do that, we're going to create a method. I'm going to call this check score. Okay? And just to keep things nice and awesome, we're going to create a variable called winning score. And we're going to set that equal to 2. And it's going to be an integer. I keep forgetting these, I don't know why. Alright, so check score, and we're going to need to call check score from the update method. Okay, so that it gets called at every frame to see what the score is. Now, let's see here, player score. Alright, so we want to check to see if either the player score or the computer score has exceeded the score to win, or if it's equal to. Alright, so if player score is greater than or equal to winning score, or computer score is greater than or equal to winning score, then we want to check if the player score is greater than or equal to the winning score, and computer score is less than the player score minus 1. And why do we do this? We do this because we want there to be a tiebreaker. So like if the computer is playing, if we're playing a game and the computer gets the player's at 9, the computer's at 10, and then the, that wouldn't work. Let's say 10 is our winning score, and the computer is just at 9, and the player reaches a score of 9. That means that the next time the computer plays or gets a point, he'll be at 10. We want to give the player a chance to score if the okay, so here's the scenario basically. The player reaches a score of 10. The computer has a score of 9. If we take the player score and subtract by 1, we get 9. Okay? Since the computer score is 9, it can't be less than 9. So the game continues, right? If the computer has a score of 8, which is less than 9, then the player wins. That's basically how that works. we want there to be a buffer zone of 2 points before either one can win. And that's just to make the game a little more interesting, right? So, if this is true, then the player wins. Okay, so player wins. Otherwise, we want to check, we want to say else if the computer score is greater than or equal to the winning score, and the player score is less than the computer score minus 1. If that happens, then the computer wins. Okay? Now, if you don't want to implement this, and you don't have to, obviously it's your game, you're following my tutorial, this is just something that I implemented that I like. If you don't want to do this, then all you have to do is say if the player score is greater than or equal to than the winning score. If the player score is greater than or equal to the winning score, then the player wins. If the computer score is greater than or equal to the winning score, then the computer wins. It's just as simple as that. So with that, we can create 2 more methods. We can create a private method, private void, player wins, private void, computer wins. Okay, and here we say if the player wins, we do this. We call the HUD, and we say when player dot enabled equals true. And if the computer wins, when computer dot enabled equals true. All right. And once that happens, we want the game to stop. So guess what? We're going to create another method, and we're going to call this game over, because the game is technically over. So then we would call game over from here, and we would also call game over from here. And one more thing we have to do is we actually have to call these methods in here. So player wins, and here computer wins. Okay, so what do we put in the game over method? Well, let's have a look. What do we have here? So we're going to destroy the ball, of course. Ball dot destroy. Oops. Ball dot game object. Sorry. And we are going to HUD dot play again dot enabled equals true. Actually, that already equals true. So here's what we'll do: is HUD dot play again dot text equals what do we have that set to now? Press spacebar to play. Alright, so we're going to set HUD.playAgain.text equal to press space, we'll do all caps, press spacebar to play again. Okay. Press spacebar to play again. So obviously we also do not want next round to be called if the player points assigned. So we're going to have to add a game state. And the way that we're going to do that is up here in the variables, we're going to go in and we're going to do an enumeration. And we're going to call it game state. And in the game state, we're going to say playing, game over, paused, oops, and launched. And we're going to go ahead and create a public variable. We're going to create this of type GameState, the enumeration we just created. We're going to call it GameState. I'm going to set it equal to GameState.launched. Okay. And in our next round, we're going to say if GameState.playing, then we are going to allow this stuff to happen. Okay? And in our game over, we are going to change our game state to GameState.GameOver. So GameState equals GameState.GameOver. Okay? So what happens is at the very beginning, we start with our game state and instantiate it at GameState.launched. We still need to change the game state to .playing, but when we change the game state to game over, the game state no longer is playing, so we're not spawning new balls. Okay, so the ball's destroyed, game state's changed, this can't run anymore. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to actually create a method to start the game. So let's do that. So let's put that here, and we're going to create it privately. Start game. Alright, so the first thing that happens when we start the game is we want to set the player score to 0, the computer score to 0. We want to set HUD.playAgain .enabled equals false. Actually, play again. We want to set the text property equal to press spacebar to play. We want to set the HUD player score text to 0. We want to set the HUD computer score text to 0. We want to set WinComputer.enabled to false, so it doesn't show up. HUD.WinPlayer, we want to set the enabled property to false as well. And we want to set our game state to game state is playing. Okay. And then we want to reset our paddle computer position. Transform local position equals new vector 3 paddle computer dot transform dot local position dot x 0 and paddle computer dot transform dot local position dot z for the z-axis, and then we want to call spawn ball. All right. Alright, so next thing we want to do, press spacebar to play. Actually, we don't want to put that here. Yeah, we want to put that in the start method. We're going to take the spawn ball out of the start method. Put that here. And then we're going to create a check input method. So check input for the spacebar. Alright, so we're going to say if game state equals game state dot launched, or game state equals game state dot game over, we want to check the input get key up for the spacebar. So we use keycode dot space, and if that's the case, we want to start game. Okay, that's when the start game method will get called. So press spacebar to play in a start method that sets that text. We also need to call check input from our update method. And if the spacebar is pressed, we call start game if the game is launched or the game state is game over. So we press spacebar, start game gets called. Start game is right here. We set everything to 0. We disable the win computer and win player. We set the game state to playing. We should also disable the press spacebar to play. So HUD.playAgain.enabled equals false. If we're at game over, we need to enable that after we set the text. So we do HUD.playAgain.enabled equals true. Start game disables that play again text, and there's one more thing we can do since we're already in here. Let's create a method to pause and resume the game. So this will be another private method, so we'll do void pause resume game. Okay. So here we're going to say if game state paused. We're checking to see if the game state's paused, because if it is, then we want to obviously resume it. If it isn't, then we want to pause it. So we're going to say game state equals game state dot playing, game state equals game state dot paused. Okay. So then the other thing is we're going to want to utilize our play again text to let the player know that the game is paused. So HUD.playAgain.text equals press game is paused, press space to play again to continue playing. Okay, HUD.playAgain.enabled equals true. And here we're just going to basically, oh wait, if it's paused, we need to put that down here. If we're paused, then we want to hide that play again text, so we're going to set it to false. Okay, so then let's see. Okay, so we're going to use the spacebar to also pause and resume the game. So, and that's here. So we're going to say if game state equals game state dot paused, or game state equals game state dot playing, if input dot get key up, key code dot space, going to pause resume game. Okay, so the only thing that's going to happen here is that it's not going to spawn another ball, right? Let's see here. If game state is, because it's paused, it's going to not spawn another ball, but we also need to put that somewhere else. We need to from, and I made this public, yep, game state. Alright, so ball already has a reference to game here. So in our update method, we're going to say if game dot, we even have to, yes, game dot game state equals game state dot paused okay, I know we're gonna have to not it, so we're gonna put an exclamation mark here because we want this method to be called the move method for the ball as long as the game is not paused. Okay, so that should make everything work. So let's have a look here. Go here and we go play, and we have compiler errors. If not game.gameState, oh, if game.gameState does not equal, there we go. And let's go back in here, press play. We have a null reference exception, ball, and computer. And that's probably because the computer script is called before the game script's called, so we need to set our execution order. So we go game object, edit, and project settings, and script execution order. There's nothing here, so we're going to add the game, which is going to get instantiated first, then the ball. Actually, the ball script gets instantiated from here. So then the computer, and then the player. Actually, we should probably instantiate the HUD script. Well, the HUD script gets instantiated with the HUD, so that's fine. So game, computer, player. So let's leave it in that order. So let's play. And we still have a null reference exception. Oh, that's because we're trying to reference the HUD before it gets instantiated. Okay, so we do need to add HUD to our script execution order, and we're just going to move it up above game. Apply, and let's press play. And we still have a null reference exception error. And this time it comes from game. And still it's having an issue. Oh, that's because we're assigning this before we're actually assigning the HUD variable. Alright, so here, and let's go back to Unity, press play. And null reference exceptions. Computer, ball, if not ball, ball equals game object dot find game object with tag. Oh, wait a minute. Are we actually spawning the ball when we start the game? Are we actually starting the game from the ball class? Or sorry, from the game class? We're not. So, oh, well that makes sense because the computer is expecting there to be a ball already, but there isn't because we haven't pressed spacebar yet. So, we need to go into the computer script and do the same thing here. We need to say game if, and we did this wrong. We actually have to go back to ball, say game.GameState. Okay, no, that's right. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing in our computer and our player. So, computer, we're not going to let you move until... Yep. So we're going to make a game object, oops, private game, and we're going to call it game. And in the start method, we are going to define game. And then here we're going to take game if game.GameState doesn't equal game.GameState.is paused. Then we allow the move method to be called. And we're going to do the same thing for the player, just for good measure. Alright, so player and player. I'm going to put here, we're not going to allow the player to do any kind of movement. Alright, we have to also take game. I'm just copying and pasting here. And the start method. Then we have to define game. Game. There. Alright, let's go back to Unity. No more null reference exceptions, please. And there is still a null reference exception. Ah. Of course. Why did I seem to forget that? So, if the game state does not equal paused, and game.GameState equals, well, we just have to make sure that it equals playing. Yeah. .GameState equals game.GameState playing. Because paused isn't going to mean much when we're in launched. So it obviously isn't going to equal paused. So, same thing here. Game.GameState equals GameState playing, then that's fine. And then the ball is going to need the same kind of thing here, which is, which is in the game. Yeah, that's what we're using. We're using playing. Alright. Back in Unity. No null reference messages. Perfect. Okay, so press spacebar to play. Game is paused, press spacebar to continue. Well, that was weird. Nope, it wasn't weird. Because if game state equals paused or game state equals playing, which it does because we did this and then it checked that. So let's move this above this piece of code. press spacebar to play. And I'm going to try to press spacebar to pause. Game is paused, press spacebar to continue playing. And we're continuing to play. Alright, so I've set our number to 2. So we're just going to go, and that's good. Press spacebar to play again. So we start over. Computer 1 at 2, but the text didn't show. So 1 and 2. Alright, so what have we got for text? Computer when we've actually got nothing written in there. Computer, we'll just write when. Same thing for the player, when. Okay, and what we'll do is we will disable these so that they don't show up. Alright, so now let's try this again. Spacebar to play. Whoever gets the 2 first should win. This time it's going to be me. I just can't let the computer get a point or we'll have to play to 3. There we go. Oh. So this didn't get enabled like it should have. Maybe it's this that we need to. Okay. And we're playing. Not winning yet. Oh, computer. Come on. Yes, and I win, and it works. Awesome. Alright, let's place the okay. Now we're going to let the computer win, just to make sure. And the computer wins, and we can press space to play again. Scores get reset. And now let's check to see if one of us gets, like if I get a point and the computer gets a point, if we can play to 3 instead of 2. Alright, so here the computer's got a point. And now if he gets the 2, if I get the 2, yep, the game continues. But now if I get a point, then I should win at 3. There, perfect. Alright. We have a working game. So this pretty much takes care of Pong. You know, Pong is basically done. The only thing is that, you know, there's things that you can do to make the game harder, which, that's why I'm going to make one more episode for you guys, and that's going to happen next week. And that episode is basically going to be how to make the game harder, increase the difficulty over time, okay? So I'm not going to give away any of those secrets yet, and I don't really think there are that many. So, but once we get there, you guys will hopefully enjoy it. So yeah, that's it. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. Comments go down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more awesome tutorials. And I'll see you next week.